Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. We should be joined with Ron Patterson of Lumen Photon. Ron, are you there? Yes, sir. We will have Ron shortly, and here's the story. Ron is Patterson is the director of Lumen Photon Therapy, and Lumen Photon, of course, is the far and near infrared light therapy. The Lumen Photon Therapy device is one of the most amazing devices we have for stimulating detoxification, healing, regeneration, stem cell activation, increasing nitric oxide. For example, one of the things we found with Proline Sauna, if you do regular 1-hour sauna sessions, you get a 40% increase, but you can put it directly over your heart, over your blood vessels, over a leg where you're getting cramps, over an area where you want to heal. If you want to turn off pain, setting number 7. If you want to use tissue regeneration and stem cell activation. If you want to reduce C-reactive protein and increase decrease the inflammation in the blood vessels around the body, you put it over the thoracolumbar junction of your low back. If you're trying to improve your cardiac circulation, you put it directly over the chest with a NICO setting. If you're trying to improve brain function, whether it's autism or post-traumatic concussion of the brain, or eye problems like retinal problems or cataracts, you can use some of the various settings. Setting number 3 and NICO for regeneration, setting number 7 for reducing intraocular pressures. It really is a pretty amazing technology, and Lumen Photon Therapy is one of the ones that I particularly like. In fact, I have mine plugged in and actually using it right now while I'm on the air. And after my very vigorous exercise, I can slap it on a spot that is not behaving itself after a really super vigorous exercise, and it settles it down. Ron, how are things going, and what's happening with Lumen? What's the latest stories about treatment of little birds, pets, and people?
Well, again, we recently had the one that jumps right out at me is a gentleman who was in his mid-80s who had congestive heart issues, and he could barely breathe. He was in a wheelchair with the plugs all over him, trying to keep him alive. And that said, they'd come down, ordered had one of them, and I went up and talked with him about using it, and he was in miserable shape. And within 3 days, his breathing had dramatically improved. He was able to stand up and move around a little bit, which he has been in a wheelchair for some time. I mean, he has no muscle tone, so it was a little bit awkward there, but he was able to get up, was able to do that. His wife had been dealing also with severe pain. Just they couldn't quite diagnose it in her legs, but it was just real pain. And I said, well, use number 7 on it and let me know how you're doing. And she called me the next morning. She said, oh, it's just worse. It's worse. And I said, okay, well, then back off completely and then start with number 7, using it for 5 minutes or so. Then the third day after this, that was it for her. Pain was gone at that point, and it was gone. And it was the mistake that I made was number 7 is a very sedative setting for people that are not familiar with this. Number 7 is the highest pulsation frequency. It's a very sedative setting, and normally it manages pain with no problem. But somebody who's if it's a tremendous amount of inflammation, it can maybe begin to break that down too rapidly and cause that type of pain, which can be quite painful. Anyway, his and her situation were both they just couldn't believe it. And as I said, they were both in their mid-80s, and for them to get those kind of results was pretty much what I had actually expected, because that's what my parents had endured right up until my dad, the 2 days before my dad died. He was still working in the yard as if nothing had hit, and the doctors had completely missed the fact that he had a stage 4 lymphoma. They were treating him with congestive heart failure, but he didn't take any medication. He was using the lights on his heart for improving the heart function, so he could go out there and work in the yard all day long, come back in 2 or 3 times, use the pad on him for about 15 minutes on his heart, and that was it. Heart and lungs, and he was fine. So that's fairly simple things to do. My wife and I ran across this therapy in the equine world, which is where we live in western North Carolina, where the U.S. Olympic equestrian team trained for some 60 years or so. So it works on animals very large. It works on cats. It works on canaries. It works through clothing, through a cast, on people. All of those things.
The cast thing is really neat, because you can have somebody that has a cast and they're trying to speed healing, and you can actually punch the energy right through a cast, which I think is pretty cool.
And Dr. I guess was the out of it. Anyway, we need if somebody is deficient in copper or zinc or magnesium, those are definitely things that Dr. Bell has. These available for you. I would say if you order one of our units, buy those because those make everything happen. If somebody is deficient in those, that's the only reason that we've seen that somebody will miss out on something.
Right. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Now, here's the situation. I tell people, let's go head to toe.
Yeah.
If you've got balding, you want to use LUMEN photon pad. If you've got a traumatic head injury, if you've got tinnitus, chronic ringing in your ears, if you've got periodontal, what's called NICA, or cavitations around your teeth, if you've got osteomyelitis of the bone, if you've got a dental implant reaction, so you're getting a periodontal and dental reaction with an osteomyelitis, if you've got a chronic carotid artery or circle of Willis circulatory problem in your head or neck, if you have coronary artery disease, if you have chronic obstructive lung disease, if you have abdominal inflammation, inflamed liver from hepatitis, abdominal pain from Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, chronic pelvic inflammatory disease, if you've got any form of chronic pelvic infections of any kind, like chronic herpes zoster, herpes simplex infections, human papillomavirus, which of course is a precursor to cancer 6% of the time with genital urinary cancer. If you've got circulatory problems in your lower legs, so blocked artery, the dental artery, if you've got peripheral neuropathy and you're diabetic or it's toxic because you've been a firefighter exposed to toxic chemicals, if you've got basically a chronic repetitive motion injury, so you've got carpal tunnel syndrome in your wrist or tarsal tunnel in your foot, if you've got a cubital tunnel at the elbow, all these things like thoracic outlet syndrome, chronic spinal stenosis, which is a dural inflammation around the exit foramen of the nerve, all of these things respond to LUMEN photon. Now, we use their nutraceuticals in conjunction with it, but there's no such thing as a condition that won't be helped. We have anti-inflammatory properties, detoxification properties, nitric oxide properties to stimulate circulation, light properties to increase protein transcription and tissue regeneration, and literally activation of the informational technology so that the stem cells know where to get off this freeway of your circulation and microcirculation, how to tunnel in and differentiate into the specific cell types. So light therapy is a universal therapy. Now you can combine it with SomaPulse, which is a polar magnetic field from the North Pole developed at NASA. You can use SomaPulse therapy along with LUMEN. It's very portable because it requires very little power. And the SomaPulse requires a 9-volt rechargeable battery. So, I usually like the lithium pyrophosphate batteries. I think that people need to start realizing that aging is not an inevitable process. The same genes that you had when you're a baby are there when you're 80. I think if you supply the nutrients, if you detoxify the body, if you present the body with the stem cells that you already have, even if you're 80, at least a percentage, maybe it's 2% of your cells are as healthy stem cells as when you're newborn. You just need to increase that number of stem cells. And when you put, for example, the LUMEN over the pelvis bones, which are your pelvic bones and your large bones of your spine and your say, femur, the largest number of cells is there and in your rib cage around your chest. The rib cage is some very vascular bones that have very high amounts of stem cells. Those stem cells migrate out under the influence of light therapy. They then find the tissue that has markers, usually markers like ergothioneine, which is one of the ones we give with MycoD2. There are growth factors like our microdose, Supernox, which releases nitric oxide because that helps to identify the cells and tissues where the stem cells need to go to regenerate the tissue. So if you can generate nitric oxide, you can increase that with KARDOVITE, you increase that with Supernox, you increase that with things that are going to improve microcirculation in the body, and that's where we get things like our LUMEN photon therapy. And that's what's neat about it. It's almost like a universal life, instead of light therapy, we'll call it life therapy. Because it has the properties to detoxify, to regenerate, to turn off pain. Post-op, every post-op unit should have these, whether you're a plastic surgeon or abdominal surgeon or orthopedics. Anybody, dental surgeon, should be using LUMEN photon therapy rather than telling people, here's a script for some narcotic pain pills or anti-inflammatories.
Primary key is you got to use it.
Yeah, if you use it, it'll work. I have mine on right now, and it works. It's wonderful. And it's not a heating pad, it's a light pad. Amazing.
It's pretty, but it's much better when you use it. So.
Yeah, I got mine on my chest right now. It's really wonderful. I just turn it on, and I can take a break and zip off my desk and turn the little sucker off, and I'm going to go take a break now. So we'll see you again in a couple of days on Tuesday, I think, right?
Okay.
Tuesday.
Yes, sir.
Have a great weekend. We'll see you then. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And we are joined with John Bartlett of BARRICADE FIREGEL, and of course the Chief of the Fire Department up at Palomar Mountain. Can you tell us your name, Chief, and what your experiences are up at Palomar?
Hey, yes, George Lucia. And yes, Palomar Mountain is my home, and I actually was fire chief. I just retired from that volunteer position a couple of months ago, but I'm still a career fire chief right at the base of the mountain for Valley Center. So it's very rural, very pretty. We're up at 6,000 feet.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful area of the country. It's up near the lakes there, of course, which supply water to this part of Southern California. Now, of course, because of the geography, you know that a fire caught anywhere in the mountain was going to shoot up the sides of that mountain very quickly. So the story that I'd heard is that you used the BARRICADE FIREGEL to save the community. Tell us what happened.
Well, we're talking about 2007 and the fire ceased in San Diego. There were a number of fires simultaneously. The one on Palomar Mountain, which was named the Pumacha Fire, was the last. And not only did we have a challenge because there had never been a fire there before, and the fuels were ready to burn, but we were the seventh incident, and there were no resources. We had no aircraft or additional help. All that was up there was the community volunteers. And so what we had a little bit of a lead time. We could see the fire coming, and we were able to prep a number of the houses at the top of the mountain with the FIREGEL, with the BARRICADE, and it turned out, it was our first real experience with it, and we ended up not losing a single structure at the top of the mountain. The entire residential area was saved, and a majority of that was due to the BARRICADE application and the resistance to fire, sparks, and heat, and the local volunteers being able to clear brush and monitor the fire so it did not get into the residential area.
Now, I guess what we talked about before was the chain of fire, which means it goes from lower flashpoint items like grass and dried brush, etc., that may be around the eaves of homes or bushes in an area. The angle of wind and the direction of wind that can carry that fire and heat up toward the higher flashpoint materials, and the fact they cleared the brush, but also the FIREGEL basically blocked the ability of the fire to relight up things that ordinarily would explode just with the heat coming up the side of the mountain. What would you say for someone considering the idea of saving their home or business? How important is it to have FIREGEL available to their fire department and at their home or their community? Because it's not just your own home you want to protect the homes next to you and the community, because if the fire starts in their home, it can also jump to your roof and your home. I mean, in the 2007 fire, we just had our house on our roof, we call power jetted off the cinders and so on that were there for years. It was hard to find somebody that actually would do that for us. We managed to clear off all the debris, but the closest fire was about 5 miles away. But nevertheless, it could have lit brush by our home and literally demolished the home as well. So we were just very lucky in 2007 that our home didn't go on fire.
Oh, yeah. Well, Doctor, let me tell you, you said it, and the wildfire phenomenon, which is not new to us, but in Southern California for sure, with the Santa Ana conditions, which a lot of people don't understand, and the dry brush, the Mediterranean climate, which pushes sparks every which way in an unpredictable pattern. The fire creates its own weather and doesn't really follow any rhyme or reason. One of the biggest issues that we have is that we have so many resources supplied and diluted that there may not be a fire engine able to go to your neighborhood. And
right.
You need to depend upon what you do before the fire and what plan you have. The FIREGEL, the BARRICADE, is one of the best tools you can have in your toolbox. And you need to use that along with clearing brush and cleaning up debris and patching holes and putting screen on the sockets. I mean, there's so many things to do. But when it's time to walk away, the FIREGEL is what gives you that peace of mind that you've covered all the combustible surfaces and that it's going to adhere and remain moist for 2 or 3 days. I mean, our experience in 2007 is we applied it. The fire lasted 2 weeks. We went back and re-wet it, and it grew back to its original proportion, and we maintained it for more than 2 or 3 weeks. It was just amazing how resistant and resilient it was. And so, again, everybody needs to have a home kit. They can do it themselves and then evacuate. It's one of the best resources you can have on hand if you live in a wildfire area.
Exactly. So I think what people should do is they should also get a hold of their local fire chief, where we are in Vista, California. All of our neighbors were in a home-gated community. We should get them to get the FIREGEL, BARRICADE, FIREGEL. I think it's important for people to understand that the Southwest United States now is in extreme danger. And it's a good example. These are cyclical. We're in a very bad cycle, maybe a long cycle. But fires happen anywhere, in a business district, and it may not even be in a fire danger area. If a fire starts, it can easily spread to surrounding homes and brushes and other materials through that chain of fire we talked about. And John, can you give us some ideas on strategies that people can use with the FIREGEL to protect their home if fire starts, or they get a fire alert on the news or television or radio? What do they do if they have the kit on hand? Because you have special material hoses for fire departments that allow a longer spread. You've got the homes sets that include a special hose and pump that attaches to it. You also have a high-pressure nozzle system that's going to be soon available that allow it to do like a pressure washer type thing that allow you to even get further projection without a professional fire hose that allows you to do that as well. What are the steps people should take if they hear a news report? Should they start going around their property and looking at the periphery at things that are going to likely to burn and either reduce those materials or try to cut them down and then spray them down to make certain that they don't explode with fire and spread to their eaves or their home? Well, what's the procedure?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier, Dr. Bill, when you said the real answer is a cooperative program between both the homeowner and the fire department.
Right.
And when Chief Lucia was on Palomar Mountain, that's exactly what he made happen up there. We were up on Palomar training not only his firefighters, but also the homeowners, and George Lucia also brought in the local CERT team, the Community Emergency Response Team. And it's going to take an effort like that in order to really make an impact on these wildland fires burning so many houses. I happen to be in Southern California at the moment. I flew in yesterday. I'm up at the site of the San Marcos fire, where they lost many structures, but I'm here specifically to look at the houses that were saved using BARRICADE, where the homeowners were able to spray it on themselves using a regular garden hose, and then they evacuated when the...
Welcome back, and if you want to contact FIREGEL, you can go to directly FIREGEL.com. And by the way, when you do, make sure you tell them that you were sent by the Nutrimedical Report and Dr. Bill. When you get your kit, what's the procedure people should do around their home or their business to protect it from fire? Because we're going to see explosive fires this summer and early fall. And I think that if it's a long-term drought, we're going to see these things proceed right through the winter and the summer. I think it's a long-term process that's going to take a while to sort out. Some people said that the La Nina will stop that, or the monsoon rains, which are supposed to come. I don't see any rain coming. I mean, I saw some clouds in the last few days and spitting rain for a few minutes that hardly did anything to even our patio around our house. I think if it wasn't for the fact we were getting irrigation from Palomar Mountain and Lake Henley and from the district and from now our Carlsbad desalination units and so on, and what's left of the Colorado River, which is pretty now down to a trickle. It's down to the level it was when they first put the Hoover Dam. We're in a real deep trouble, and there's cities and towns in Texas where they're less than 30 days away from total drought, which means no water for even flushing toilets or turning on your tap. This is going to get very catastrophic for populations because you can't maintain a civilization, you can't maintain society without water. And we've talked about why that is, but let's get into some of the procedures. How do you protect your home and your business? Besides, and of course, you mentioned to me a few weeks ago that there's a new power washer type system you can attach to your new FIREGEL kit as well as coming shortly. But there's a hose system that literally just attaches to a garden hose. You can spray down your roof, your eaves, your bushes. You can go and do all these things. Is there a specific procedure people should follow or a sequence that is the best way to approach this?
Absolutely, and again, you're making so many valid points today. I think the one of the factors that really is going to allow Barricade to make an impact on saving houses in these wildland fires is that for the first time, it really enables the homeowner to take an effective action. And Dr. Bill, you and I have spoke. We don't want our message to be misunderstood as the resident should stay there and put himself in jeopardy in order to spray this gel on his house. The Barricade technology allows a homeowner using a regular garden hose to help his local fire department, to help the local incident management teams that are managing these wildfire incidents. He can take the effective action of long before it's time for him to evacuate. He can go ahead and he or she can spray their house down using a regular garden hose. Then, like the residents did in the San Marcos fire, when the fire incident management team tells them to evacuate, they can do so, and knowing that their house has this gel coating on it. We have many areas. Chief Lucia had a program where when the homeowner sprayed their house, the fire department knew that all they had to do at that point in order to keep the protection that was applied by the homeowner, all they had to do to maintain that and preserve that protection was to just every 6, 8, 10 hours go by and lightly spray the house with water. The gel coating has the capacity to soak up and hold water, much like chemical sponges.
Right.
And so by the homeowner taking that effective action, it helps the fire department to save many more houses than they could if without the gel.
Yeah, in other words, the gel's there, you just rehydrate it, and it continues to provide its action for weeks.
Absolutely.
Well, that's really clever. Now, tell us more about the Palomar fire situation. Chief, when you did this protection, how do you identify the airflow patterns, the specific, we call the tinderbox areas that are going to blow up and by the chain of fire carry it toward buildings? What kinds of rules of thumb did you follow in order to identify what we call the problem and danger areas?
Well, Doctor, one of the things that we look at very closely is the age of the fuel. You know, if there hasn't been a recent fire, then we know that the growth is potential to travel fast, and the ladder fuels will make it move very quickly across the acreage. The other thing that we're very clear on is that because of the vertical terrains and the mid-slopes, we actually can see the weather patterns. You know, if it's not a fire, then, you know, the fog or the rain is flowing in the same direction. So we know where the saddles are, we know where the drains and troughs are, and those are the areas we concentrated on. We could see where the fire was, and we knew which way it was going to be drawn up. And the plan was that we knew it was going to crest, but we wanted to prep the area where it was going to crest first, and any of the homes. Our plan was to let the fire go around the homes and continue on. We probably won't be able to stop it, but we wanted to be able to protect the structures and make sure that nobody got hurt. Inevitably, in a wildfire, many of the homes are lost hours afterwards. You know, the firefighter comes through, and we're very conscious of where the fire is, but the sparks that land on a roof or the sparks that land in a pile of debris next to a house that go unattended because the evacuation and no one sees it, and if it gets into one small hole, one small crack or vent and gets into the house, hours later the house burns down. We found that properly applied gel at all those vantage points, at the base of the foundation, any crevices, you know, completely circle the house so that if an ember blows in, it's not laying in the valley of a roof or in an area that it can reignite. That made more difference than anything. The fact that an unattended house, the sparks could not ignite and smolder and start a structure fire hours later.
Right. Yeah. In other words, you identified the chain of fire ignition and you blocked it. So that's really cool.
Yes, sir.
Now, I don't think the other thing is it's biodegradable. This is the first, if you want to call it, fire protectant that has no chemical effects. So it doesn't affect if you have a vegetable garden or if you have plants that are sensitive or to these chemicals. You're not going to end up, basically dosing your yard or your vegetable garden or your home with toxic chemicals. That's what's really neat about it.
That's an interesting point, Doctor. When we went shopping for FIREGEL, we didn't have it in 2005, and we wanted to buy it. We're Palomar Mountains in the middle of the Cleveland National Forest, and we're very conscious of the ecosystem. And so one of the things that made us attracted to this was its green and clean manufacturing. So we couldn't have anything else in the forest. And so not only did it perform, but we had no problems with the environment after its use.
Yeah, that's really very amazing. Now, around the country, how well, in terms of penetration of the FIREGEL technology, is getting across the country? Because to me, it should be a state and national emergency. FEMA should stockpile this. All the fire departments should have it. All the state government should have it. Here in California and other states, what I call fire danger areas, they should have already appropriated a budget to help local fire departments. Here in our community, I'm going to do what I can to personally help the fire department make sure that they can afford to have enough FIREGEL on hand. Because if a fire starts, it's not just your home. It's maybe the chain of electricity that runs up to the tower to pump water. Or maybe it's going to be a power line that will bring power to your home. Or maybe it's going to be your adjacent neighbor, because if their home goes on fire, your home can go on fire too. So, in other words, it's a community issue. It's an issue of infrastructure destruction. They discovered this here in California in the 2007 fires when the power corporations didn't have their power lines in an area that wasn't in low danger. They actually had power lines that had not been moved, and as a result, they tried to pass on to the ratepayers, which they've done, the cost of moving their power lines away from high danger areas where updrafts of heat, tinderbox areas that are more likely to explode in fire would destroy power lines. What's happening there across the country and especially in states? Well, I guess, gentlemen, we'll have to have you back on to talk about that because we came up to the bumper music. Excellent. Again, if they want to contact you, John, your number to contact, the 800 number is?
The 800 number is 1-800-201-3927, and they can also reach us at firegel.com. Thank you, Dr. Bill.
Yeah, 800-201-3927. And I'm back. Fareed. Okay, we're live. Yeah, Fareed, let's talk about KARDOVITE. I've got some new information. I've mentioned in the past the Berkeley nitric oxide test strips. And I tell people that over age 20, everyone in Western society should be using KARDOVITE. Now, I'll explain why that is. Everyone in our society is toxic. Toxic from bisphenol A, toxic chemicals, heavy metals. Everyone in our society has some degree of insulin resistance and leptin resistance. It turns out one of the primary things that's going on is a lack of production of nitric oxide. We call Syndrome X. Insulin resistance, leptin resistance basically means uncontrolled appetite dealing with high glycemic foods, sugar. What happens is people not only have sugar metabolism, but the insulin causes the release of brain chemicals, endorphins, dynorphin, beta endorphin, etc. And when you start taking KARDOVITE, what you do is you start stimulating with hawthorn berry, for example, nitric oxide. You reduce oxidative stress in the artery walls. You reduce the formation of unstable plaque. You detoxify heavy metals and chemicals from the liver and the other tissues. You improve the microcirculation. In fact, we now know that KARDOVITE is one of the major formulas I use for people who say they want to do stem cell regeneration, whether they've got borderline kidney function, heart function, etc. KARDOVITE is really important, and you can use tests like the Berkeley test strips to measure the back of your tongue, your nitric oxide production, which is one of the major metabolic pathways. But it's not the only one. There's many. The formula basically was developed by Sam Ibrahim, your dad, who was a pharmacognosist trained in Germany, who in Edmonton, Alberta, developed for the Chelation Society. If we give a little bit of history of this, chelation is really important. My first patient I referred for chelation was 34 years ago. And I had a fairly wealthy Mormon lady who had gone to her stake president, because it's a very large Mormon community in Calgary. I had a practice I purchased from them, Ken Remington, who was a Mormon, who had 22,000 Mormon patients. So because I wasn't a Mormon, I had lost a number of them in the first year, down to about 16,000, but I still had a big Mormon practice. And Mormons don't smoke or drink, but they do, and they don't drink coffee, but they do eat. And this lady was heavy, but she had coronary artery disease, and her stake president was also a cardiac surgeon who worked at one of the local hospitals, and he was a very good surgeon. So what he suggested to her is that you'll die on the table. I contacted a friend of mine, Stajan Warnes, who recommended that I refer her to a clinic in New York City where she could go for a month or two to get not only IV chelation therapy, but exercise therapy and other treatments. She couldn't walk 20 feet without getting chest pain or shortness of breath. And she was actually developing signs of pretty progressive congestive heart failure. And basically the cardiac surgeon was right. If you put her on the operating table, she would probably die. She probably would develop a cardiac arrhythmia or an acute arrest and would not come back. When she had her chelation therapy, within a month, she was walking 5 miles a day. And when she came back to see me, she'd lost like 30, 40, 50 pounds. It was a lot. And I couldn't believe the transformation. I realized that we're developing unstable plaque because we inflamed arteries. We're unstable plaque because we have free iron, heavy metals, toxic chemicals, which we have more new chemicals every day. And we wonder why when we have syndrome X, we're eating high glycemic foods that are laced with sugar and salt. And we're not talking about sea salt, but regular salt. And we wonder why we're a mess. And we're not talking just about obese people. We're talking about virtually everybody. In young people, we're seeing MODY, mature onset diabetes to the young. We're seeing vascular disease, hypertension, many conditions we don't even think are linked to syndrome X. For example, I was just reading an article earlier this morning about acne, and actually one of the presenters in the research was an anthropologist who presented that high glycemic foods given to the native peoples in the Arctic, the Eskimos, all of a sudden they developed acne. They never had acne before. Now, those same people, by the way, if they have acne, they should be on Cardovite. People say, well, are you kidding? They should not only be getting a low glycemic diet, they should be on that. If they have hypertension, if they have elevated C-reactive protein, if they have any kind of markers that indicate increased vascular disease, elevated blood insulin level, abnormal lipids, like, for example, your cholesterol and your lipids are responding to oxidative stress. So the reason why your cholesterol is high is your body's trying to repair those damaged blood vessels or other things, so the cholesterol is a reaction to that. So Cardovite helps to protect your body. So when you see somebody with high cholesterol, give them omega cod liver liquid and Cardovite. That's the first step. Then Supernox. Then we give gamma E plus dimetocopherols and magnesium glycinate, magnesium taurate. We give nutraceuticals to repair it, but the first step is to get rid of the free iron, which is the iron time bomb, because it's an oxidizer of fatty acids to form unstable plaque, and heavy metals, cadmium, lead, mercury, God knows what. All these heavy metals are present. Bisphenol A, toxic volatile chemicals that interfere with CoQ10 metabolism. So tell us about Cardovite. What's in it, and let's go through some of the components so people should understand. The reason why I have such a broad brush of who should be on Cardovite, as I say, was one of the base formulas, is because everybody in our society is toxic. And I guess you live as old as your mitochondria, and you live as well as your capillaries. Let's put it that way. And your capillaries, your microcirculation, your nitric oxide, your ability to support stem cells is all dependent on Cardovite, all the components in it. So let's go through those.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Bill. So, I like to think of Cardovite as a high-performance motor oil for your body. And, the reason I use that analogy is, what does a high-performance motor oil do? It helps the engine run better. It runs cooler. It's delivering more power. And, so Cardovite has PHOTON in it, which helps the heart muscle contractility, and you can talk a little more about that to start.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the thing that I find important is for people to understand that when you take Cardovite, if you're following specific markers, like if you do a cardioion test, if you measure C-reactive protein, if you measure lipid electrophoresis, if you look at heavy metals, you'll start to notice that those heavy metal levels are dropping. You can do a QRMA test. For example, I just did my repeat QRMA, and mine's remarkably better. I have gone through a major detox process over the last year or so, and my heavy metals now are, on the major side of the drop phase, meaning they're dropping back from wow, they're high, as those bodies was dumping them and getting them out of my system, to now they're barely detectable. And that was confirmed also in my red blood cell heavy metal analysis I did through the cardio-ion test through Genova Metametrics lab in Atlanta, just done a few weeks ago. What people should understand is your health is something you have to protect. It's not just something that randomly happens through genetics or heritage or just looking good or being slim. If you don't detoxify, if you don't nourish your cells, if you don't protect your capillaries and your microcirculation, you're not going to have it. And you're not going to live as well as even your parents or grandparents because you're living in a very, very toxic world. That's what the reality is. And, of course, we have new challenges with things like Splenda, which is artificial optical isomer sugar with chlorinated compounds. So when it's metabolized in your cells, it actually releases chlorine gas inside your cells. We have aspartame and other toxic chemicals that are brain entrainment, tissue entrainment, and oxidizing stress molecules that actually cause DNA adducts. They actually attach to your DNA of your cells. When those things happen, if you don't get them out of there, they're going to actually form stress and oxidative plaque and do other nasty things to your cells and tissues. They're going to raise the oxidative markers in your cells, the nitroproxy radical, hydroproxy radical. And as you start taking Kardovite, you remove the heavy metals, you remove the chemicals, you improve the microcirculation to make the capillaries healthier. You block a lot of the processes that form unstable plaque. And I tell people, although we give a recommended dosage, like 15 drops 3 times a day for a smaller person, 30 drops for a bigger person, I tell people, go with the flow. Measure your nitric oxide. After you're taking your nutraceuticals, dose it up until you get an adequate level of nitric oxide, and then back it off as you're getting healthier. The thing about nutraceuticals, it depends on diet, exercise, nutrition. So if, for example, using Lumen photon therapy or Proline sauna, you're taking a diet and you're now exercising with vibrational platform exercise. If you combine them with Kardovite, initially you might need to take more, and then after a while you can drop it back once the body is responding, and you can now have a dosage that the body will respond to that's more in keeping with what's on the bottle. And the key is, one of the best markers is blood pressure's normalized, circulation's great, brain works, sexual function works, nitric oxide in the Berkeley test strips is good, not just like a little pink, but they actually have a nice bright sign that you actually have nitric oxide in your saliva. Those are all important markers, and they're all present if you take Kardovite every day in an adequate dosage. Thank you for reading. We will be back in just a moment with hour number 3. You don't want to miss it with Tim Alexander, a major update in world news, and Chris Harris, our update on Fukushima. I'm on hour 2 tonight on the French Network as a guest. Major issues we're going to discuss.